You've dated different people, different cities, different lives entirely, and somehow, relationship after relationship, the same story plays out. The fade into distance that catches you off guard every single time. The partner who needs constant reassurance, or the one who pulls away the second things get real. Same wound, different face wearing it. At some point, you've asked yourself the question that keeps you up at night. Am I just choosing badly? Here's what almost nobody tells you. You're not choosing badly. You're choosing recognizable. Somewhere back in your childhood, long before you understood what was happening, something in you decided what love actually feels like. Not what it should feel like, what it does feel like, based on the only evidence you had at the time. And every relationship since has been quietly auditioned against that standard. You didn't choose it. You didn't agree to it. And until right now, you probably didn't even know it existed. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which pattern you've been running on autopilot and the specific reason it keeps building the same relationship over and over, no matter who's standing in front of you. Stay until the end, because the part most people never hear, the part about whether this can actually change, comes last. Quick thing, before we go further, if you watched the last video, the one on love bombing, you already know something about this. We left off with a question, why did it work on you specifically? This is that answer. But you don't need to have seen that video for any of this to make sense. So let's start from the beginning. The pattern you keep repeating isn't a character flaw. It's not poor judgment. It's not bad taste. It's not some personal failure you haven't fixed yet. It's an adaptation. Somewhere early, and we mean early. Before language, before memory, the way you'd recognize it, you learned how to survive a relationship with the people who are supposed to keep you safe. If they were consistent, you'll learn the world responds. If they were unpredictable, you learn to stay alert. If they pulled away when you needed them, you learned to need less. None of that was a mistake on your part. You were a child, working with the only information you had, doing exactly what every child does, adapting to what's actually there. The problem isn't that you adapted. The problem is that nobody told you the adaptation would still be running decades later, choosing your relationships for you. Psychologists call this attachment style, and there are 4 of them. So let's talk about the actual 4 recognizable patterns. Notice that we call them patterns. This isn't a theory we made up to sound clever. In the 1950s, a British psychiatrist named John Bowlby started studying something that had been mostly ignored. What happened to children who were separated from their caregivers? What he found changed how we understand human connection permanently. Infants weren't just dependent on their caregivers for food and shelter. They had a built-in drive to seek closeness, specifically for safety. And when that closeness was threatened, something measurable happened to them. A few years later, a researcher named Mary Ainsworth took it further. She ran an experiment now famous in psychology, putting toddlers in an unfamiliar room, bringing in a stranger, having the caregiver leave, then return, and carefully watching how each child responded. What she found was that children didn't all respond the same way. Some were upset when the caregiver left, but comforted easily when they came back. Others were inconsolable, even after the caregiver returned. Others barely reacted at all, at least on the surface. She had just identified something we'd later call attachment styles. And here's the part that matters most for you. Watching this as an adult, decades removed from any of it, those same patterns don't disappear. They become the lens through which you experience every close relationship you'll ever have. 4 patterns. Let's make this simple. For each one, I'll ask you a question. Just notice your honest answer. Number 1. Secure attachment. When something goes wrong in a relationship, a fight, a bad night, a misunderstanding, what's your first instinct? If it's, let's talk about this, and you mean it, that's secure attachment. You trust the relationship can survive a hard conversation. Closeness doesn't scare you. Distance doesn't panic you. That's it. That's the whole pattern. 2. Anxious attachment. Your partner doesn't text back for a few hours. What happens in your body? If your stomach drops, if you start replaying the last conversation, looking for what you did wrong, if silence feels less like they're busy and more like something is wrong, that's anxious attachment. You learned somewhere early that love wasn't guaranteed, so now you watch for it. 3. Avoidant attachment. A relationship starts getting serious. Real closeness, real dependence on each other. What happens in you? If part of you wants to pull back, if independence starts to feel more urgent than connection, if I need space comes up more than it does for people around you, that's avoidant attachment. You learned that needing someone was risky, so now you protect yourself by needing less. Number 4. Disorganized attachment. You want closeness, genuinely, deeply. But when you get it, when someone is finally close, something in you panics anyway. You pull them in, then you push them away, then you pull them in again. If that confuses you as much as it confuses your partner, that's disorganized attachment. You want the thing you're afraid of. 4 questions, 4 patterns. If you recognized yourself in one of them, or honestly, in pieces of 2, that's normal. Nobody's purely one type all the time. This isn't a label. It's not a diagnosis carved in stone. It's the starting point for the part that actually matters. Why does this keep repeating? Here's the question that actually matters. If you know your pattern causes pain, if you've lived through the same faith, the same panic, the same push and pull more than once, why does some part of you keep walking back toward it? The honest answer has nothing to do with intelligence or self-awareness or how much work you've done on yourself. It has to do with what your nervous system has learned to call safe. Not what's actually safe, what's familiar. Because here's something most people never get told. Your brain doesn't search for what's healthy. It searches for what's recognizable. And recognizable to a nervous system shaped early often looks exactly like what hurt you the first time. If you grew up anxious, always watching for the moment closeness might disappear, calm, steady love can feel, strangely, like nothing's happening. Like boredom. Like something's missing. But chaos? Someone who runs hot and cold, who keeps you slightly uncertain. That feels like love is supposed to feel, because it's the only version your nervous system was ever trained on. If you grew up avoidant, learning that needing someone came with risk, a partner who gives you space, who doesn't push, who lets you retreat when you need to, can feel oddly unremarkable. But someone intense, someone who needs you constantly, who makes you feel essential, that can feel, against all logic, like the real thing. This has a name. Psychologists call it repetition compulsion, an unconscious pull toward situations that recreate our earliest emotional experiences, not because we want to suffer, but because some part of us is still trying to finally get the ending right, still trying to make the unavailable parent stay, still trying to earn the love that once felt conditional, still replaying the same scene, hoping that this time it resolves differently. It rarely does. Not because you're failing, but because you keep casting the same role in different actors and asking them to perform a different outcome. And here's the part that explains why this feels less like coincidence and more like fate. 2 people with complementary wounds don't just occasionally find each other, they recognize each other. An anxious person and an avoidant person in a room of completely secure, easygoing options will often gravitate toward exactly each other, not because it's healthy, but because something in both of them recognizes the dynamic instantly. The anxious person's hunger for reassurance and the avoidant person's instinct to create distance fit together like 2 halves of a single, familiar machine. It doesn't feel like danger, it feels like chemistry. That's what makes this so difficult to outrun by willpower alone. You're not choosing the wrong people because you lack judgment. You're choosing the people who know exactly how to play the role your nervous system was trained to expect. This is where the last video and this one meet. If you watched it, you remember the question we left hanging. Why did love bombing work on you specifically? Not on everyone. On you, here's the answer that attachment theory gives us. If you lean anxious, think about what love bombing actually offers in those first few weeks. Constant contact. Immediate, overwhelming reassurance. Someone telling you repeatedly that you matter, that you're wanted, that you won't be left. To an anxious nervous system, one that spent years scanning for signs that connection might disappear, that's not just appealing, it's relief. It's the exact medicine your system has been craving. delivered all at once, by someone who seems to understand precisely what you need, without you ever having to ask. You're not falling for a trick because you're foolish. You're responding to the single most targeted offer your nervous system could possibly receive. Now, think about what happens if you lean avoidant instead. The same intensity that feels like relief to an anxious person can register to an avoidant one as something closer to alarm. Too much, too soon. A closeness that arrives before it's been earned. And here's the cruel twist. Sometimes that alarm is correct. Your instincts catching something genuinely manipulative before your conscious mind can name it. But sometimes that same alarm fires on something real. A person who is simply warm, present, and consistent, moving at a completely normal pace, can trigger the exact same retreat reflex because closeness itself is what your system learned to fear, not the specific person offering it, which means an avoidant pattern can do two very different things at once. It can protect you from love bombing, or it can cost you something healthy by treating it like a threat. This is why attachment style isn't just background information for understanding what happened to you in the past. It's the single biggest factor in what you're vulnerable to right now and what you might be unconsciously avoiding, even when it's exactly what you need. Knowing your pattern doesn't just explain history. It tells you where your blind spot is standing right now, waiting for the next person who knows exactly how to find it. Here's the question underneath everything we've covered so far. If this pattern was set so early, before language, before memory, before you had any say in the matter, are you just stuck with it? The honest answer? No. But it's not as simple as deciding to be different either. Psychologists call the alternative earned security. It's not the same as being born secure. It's something built, often slowly, often with real friction, by people who started out anxious, avoidant, or somewhere more tangled than either. Here's how it actually happens. In practice, the first shift is simply naming the pattern, not as judgment, as information. The moment you can recognize this is the anxious spiral starting, or this is me creating distance because closeness feels unsafe while it's happening, not 3 weeks later, you've already interrupted something that used to run completely on autopilot. The second shift is slower, and it usually requires another person. A relationship, romantic, platonic, or therapeutic, with someone who is consistently, boringly, reliably safe, can begin to retrain what your nervous system expects. Not through grand gestures, through repetition, through someone staying calm when you expected chaos, enough times that your body slowly starts to believe it. This is why the right relationship can be quietly healing, and the wrong one can deepen the exact wound it should have helped close. The third shift is the hardest, and the most necessary. At some point, you have to tolerate the discomfort of something unfamiliar feeling wrong, even when it isn't. Because here's the trap nobody warns you about. When you start choosing differently, calmer partners, steadier relationships, less intensity, it often doesn't feel like relief at first. It feels like something's missing. That feeling is not a sign you made the wrong choice. It's the sound of an old pattern losing its grip and mistaking the silence for absence. This is slow work. Nobody fully rewires a nervous system in a weekend or from watching one video, but the pattern you've been running was learned. And almost everything that can be learned can, with enough time and the right conditions, be unlearned. So here's where this actually leaves you. You didn't choose badly. You chose recognizable. A pattern written into you before you had any say in the matter, by people and circumstances you didn't pick either. That's not an excuse. It's not meant to be. It's context. And context changes everything about how you move forward from here. Because now you know the 4 patterns. You know why the same relationship keeps finding you in different bodies, different cities, different names. You know why love bombing landed the way it did, or why, if you're avoidant, you might have walked away from something real without ever understanding why it felt unsafe. And, the pattern isn't permanent. It's learned, which means it can be unlearned, slowly, with the right awareness, and sometimes with the right person standing across from you long enough to prove the old pattern wrong. That's the whole point of today, not to hand you a label, To hand you a mirror, one clear enough that the next time the same story starts to repeat, you'll recognize it before it's already written. If you saw yourself in one of these 4 patterns, drop the word below: secure, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. Just the one word. I read every single one, and I want to know which pattern found you today. Subscribe if this helped you, because next week we're going somewhere that might explain even more than attachment style does on its own. Here's the question we're opening with. Why do you feel completely certain you're right, even in the exact moments you're wrong? It's not stubbornness. It's not ego. Not really. It's something your brain does constantly, automatically, completely beneath your awareness, and it might be quietly running every disagreement you've ever had, including the ones with the people closest to you. Next week, why you think you're right, even when you're not. I'll see you in the next one.